Winter gripped the town of Coldridge, Montana, with an iron chill. Snow blanketed every rooftop, and winds screamed down from the Bitterroot Mountains, slicing through coats and silencing the morning air. Frost Lake, at the town's edge, was frozen solid, its thick ice a mirror of pale gray beneath a cloud-choked sky. At 6:15 a.m., Tom Marley, a local goat farmer, led his herd toward the lake's edge. He was used to the quiet, used to the wind and the hooves crunching over snow. But that morning something was wrong. He stopped dead. A crack jagged across the ice like a bolt of lightning. At its center, a dark shape loomed beneath the surface. Closer still, a hand, purple, stiff, and clawing at the air. Tom staggered backward, mouth agape. Then he screamed, "There's a body! Jesus Christ! There's a body in the lake!" His cry tore through Coldridge like wildfire. Within minutes, sirens echoed from the sheriff's office. Locals gathered, huddled in coats and scarves, whispering and pointing at the frozen tableau. Sheriff Donnelly arrived first but knew immediately. This wasn't small-town business anymore. By noon, a silver SUV carved through the snow and screeched to a halt. Out stepped Detective Jackson Hale, head of Major Crimes Division for the state, and beside him his partner, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger. Hale was lean and severe, every motion precise. He said nothing, merely knelt and rested his hand on Ranger's head. "Time to work, buddy." The dog gave a low growl, eyes fixed on the crack in the ice, body taut like a drawn bow. After 2 hours of careful ice breaking, the body was recovered. A middle-aged man, face pale and frozen, with dark bruises encircling his throat. "Strangled," Hale murmured after a quick inspection. "This wasn't an accident." Suddenly, Ranger barked sharply and bounded toward a patch of withered grass 15 feet from the lake. Hale followed. Beneath a wind-tossed stone lay a scrap of torn fabric, dull red with faint tribal embroidery, stained with old blood. Hale held it up to the light. "Keep this safe," he said. "It might be the only lead we've got." The investigation had begun. The victim was quickly identified: Richard Mooney, age 52, a recluse, known around Coldridge as the Ritual Man, a backwoods spiritualist who offered blessings, charms, and cures made from herbs and superstition. Some townsfolk swore by him. Others kept their distance, muttering about his unclean hands. Mooney's cabin stood alone at the base of Timber Ridge, surrounded by dense pine and snow-choked trails. Hale and his team headed there immediately. The cabin reeked of damp wood and dust. Shelves sagged with old books, jars of animal bones, dried herbs, and cryptic symbols drawn in ash. On one table lay a ceremonial robe with candle wax stains and burnt edges. But something didn't sit right. No incense, no fresh offerings, no sign this altar was used recently, Hale muttered. And no heat, despite the freeze. In the kitchen, Ranger growled low and stalked toward a rotted pantry door. Behind it, coiled neatly, was a brand new nylon rope, industrial grade, sharp-smelling, unused. "Get that bagged," Hale ordered. "Might match the marks on Mooney's neck." A shout came from the bedroom. Hale entered to find a small wooden drawer pried open. Inside were a box of condoms, a cheap bottle of bootleg whiskey, and strips of beef jerky, items that jarred with Mooney's supposed celibate and ascetic image. "He wasn't living like a holy man," said Agent Corley. Hale frowned. "He was pretending." Ranger barked from the front door. Hale turned to see the dog stiffly pointing toward the snow, at a narrow trail leading down behind the house. They followed. Just beyond the tree line, they found signs of a struggle. Broken twigs, heel prints, drag marks half concealed by the snowfall. Then, another cloth fragment. Same fabric, same blood. "He was killed here," Hale said coldly. "Dragged to the lake afterward." Back in town, the rumors began to stir. Mooney had secrets, said one local deputy leaning close. People talked, especially women, said he got touchy during rituals, but no one ever made a report, just crying behind closed doors. Hale's jaw clenched. He returned to the evidence board in his mobile command unit, taping up the scraps of cloth, photos of the bruised neck, the nylon rope, the bloodstains in the snow. A red thread now tied each piece to one name that kept coming up: Marilyn Tucker, a 36-year-old mother who had visited Mooney's cabin multiple times in the past month. Hale looked at the still image from an old highway camera. A woman in a dark coat riding a black snowmobile, helmet obscuring her face, but her posture, her build, and the jacket, all familiar. "Get me everything on Tucker," he ordered. "She's not just another mourner, she's in this." Ranger shifted beside him, ears flicking. The game was on. The following morning, Hale stood in front of a modest cabin tucked behind a line of frosted dogwoods. A light glowed in the window. Smoke curled from the chimney. Marilyn Tucker, widow, part-time grocery clerk, mother to a 7-year-old girl, opened the door with a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Detective Hale," she said, "you're here about Rick, aren't you?" Hale studied her. Mid-30s, soft voice, face worn by grief or fear, maybe both. Her hands trembled as she offered tea. "You knew Richard Mooney well," Hale said, keeping his tone flat. "I came to him for help," she said quietly. "Fertility problems, bad dreams. He gave me herbs, prayers, that sort of thing." "Did you visit him on the night of the 12th? She paused just a beat too long. "Number I was home with my daughter all night." Hale nodded, but Ranger, lying silently at his feet, suddenly growled low. The dog's nose twitched. His body stiffened. Hale caught it instantly. "Mind if I see the coat you usually wear?" he asked casually. Marilyn's eyes narrowed. "I donated it last week. Outgrown." "Shame," Hale said. "We found fabric near the body. Matches what you used to wear. Burgundy wool with ethnic embroidery." She said nothing. Hale motioned to Ranger. The dog stood, sniffed a scarf hanging on a coat rack, then barked sharply. Hale's jaw set. "That scent," he said, "was at the lake." And again near the blood-stained clearing. Marilyn's facade cracked. She looked away, blinking fast. "I didn't kill him," she said, voice low. "But I was there. I saw what happened. I should have told someone." She gripped her mug tighter. "He promised to help me, then started touching me during sessions. Told me it was part of the cleansing. I wanted to run, but he said I was cursed, that leaving would doom my daughter." Her voice broke. "I told someone, a man I knew. He said Rick deserved whatever was coming. That night I was supposed to meet him there, to confront him. But when I got to the cabin, he was already dead." "Who was this man?" Hale asked. Marilyn hesitated. "I don't know his real name. Everyone calls him Doc Sawyer. He sells herbs at the weekend market. Scar across his cheek. Talks like he swallowed gravel." Hale froze. Doc Sawyer. The same man who'd been flagged before. A traveling herbalist with a history of manipulation, threats, and spiritual counseling that blurred ethical lines. Ranger let out a low whine, then barked once, sharp and eager. Hale didn't need more. "Get me a team," he said. "We're heading to the Sunday market. It's time to find the doctor." Sunday morning, the Coldridge market was unusually quiet. Snow piled against the booths, vendors stomping their feet for warmth as customers trickled in for firewood, smoked meats, and jars of pickled preserves. At the far end, beneath a tattered green awning, sat Doc Sawyer. Stringy gray hair fell over a weathered face. A jagged scar ran from his ear to the edge of his lip. His voice was unmistakable, deep, gritty, like tires on gravel. He was stirring a pot of pine salve when Hale and 2 deputies approached. Sawyer looked up, smiled. "State boys, huh? You here for dry cough or bad dreams?" Hale didn't smile back. "We need to talk. Step outside the booth." Sawyer raised both hands with mock innocence. "That's so?" Ranger trotted forward, sniffed the edge of the table, then let out a warning growl. His hackles lifted. "Funny dog you got there," Sawyer muttered. "Funny how he growls at murderers," Hale said coldly. "Where were you on the night of the 12th? "Home. Cabin out by Route 27. Ask anyone." But his eyes shifted left. "You've had history with Richard Mooney," Hale continued. "Folks say he stole your clients. You two argued about curses, bad spirits, dead chickens. That ring a bell?" Sawyer scoffed. "Guy was a fraud. fed people lies with sage smoke and cheap incense. And you? I sell real cures. Hale's eyes flicked to a small wooden box under the table. Mind if I take a look? Got a warrant? Ranger growled again. Hale didn't wait. He flipped open the box. Inside, strips of red wool, half-burned rope, and a silver ring engraved with strange runes. Sawyer lunged, but Hale was faster. He slammed Sawyer against the booth post, one hand pinning the older man's arm, the other snapping a cuff into place. You just made this easy, Hale growled. You tried to burn the evidence, Sawyer hissed. I didn't kill him. I helped someone who wanted him dead. Who? He didn't answer. Back at the station, Hale and Ranger stood outside the interrogation room. Sawyer sat inside, breathing heavy, one eye swelling where he'd resisted arrest. You can't pin this on me, he spat. I didn't touch the body. No, Hale said, but you gave someone the rope, and you lit the fire to destroy what tied you to it. As the evidence mounted, Hale knew one thing. Sawyer wasn't the killer, but he was the spark, the matchstick, the whisper behind the curtain, and someone else, someone more dangerous, was still out there, watching, waiting. The snow kept falling. By Tuesday morning, Coldridge was wrapped in silence again. But inside the sheriff's office, Hale stood before his investigation board, every thread now tangled in red string and suspicion. Doc Sawyer had been charged with obstruction and evidence tampering, but not murder. No fingerprints on the body, no direct tie to the scene of the struggle, just whispers and rotten salves. And one name kept circling back, Marilyn Tucker. She'd lied, said she never returned to the lake that night. But camera footage now proved otherwise. A blurry image of her snowmobile passing the edge of Timber Ridge around 1:15 a.m., the same time Ranger found blood on the forest floor. Why lie if you didn't kill him? Hale muttered. He returned to her cabin. Marilyn sat stiffly on the porch, cigarette shaking between her fingers. My daughter's at school, she said quickly. Don't bring her into this. I won't. If you tell me the truth. She swallowed, looked away. I didn't kill Rick, she whispered. But someone else did. I saw it. Hale crouched beside her, voice low. You said Doc Sawyer was involved. She shook her head. Not just him. A pause. There's someone else. My husband, Evan. Hale blinked. I thought he died 2 years ago in the refinery fire, he said. That's what I told people. She leaned in. But he didn't. Flashback 2 years earlier. Evan Tucker, ex-military, volatile temper. After the fire, the town assumed he was dead. Marilyn let them, claimed his body was never found. But the truth? He had survived, burned, angry, hiding deep in the woods, coming into town only for supplies, through Doc Sawyer, through back doors. He blamed Rick, Marilyn said now. Said Rick seduced me. Said it was all some sick ritual. Her hands trembled. He made me go back. Said I had to lure Rick out of the house, that he'd do the rest. What happened at the lake? Hale asked. I ran, I couldn't watch. Ranger barked outside. A signal, a snowmobile trail, fresh, leading north. Hale's voice sharpened. Where's Evan now? Marilyn's face turned white. In the woods, near the old ranger station. He said he'd disappear, but I think he's watching. I think he never left. Hale stood, called in backup, loaded his rifle. This wasn't over. In fact, it had just become personal. The wind howled through Timber Ridge as Hale followed the snowmobile tracks deeper into the forest. Ranger stayed close, nose low to the ground, his body taut, alert. They were heading toward the ruins of an old ranger station, abandoned for over a decade after a wildfire gutted the roof. Locals said it was haunted. Hale knew better. It was the perfect place to disappear. By late afternoon, the sky was gray steel. Ranger suddenly stopped, ears pricked. A low growl bubbled in his chest. Hale raised his rifle and crept forward. The cabin appeared through the trees, hunched and blackened by time. Smoke drifted from a makeshift chimney. Someone was home. Hale motioned for silence, then approached the rear window. Inside, a figure paced, broad shoulders, thick arms, a tattered coat. His face was hidden beneath a wool hat and scarf, but Hale didn't need a clear look. Evan Tucker was alive, and he looked ready for war. Suddenly, the door swung open. Evan stepped out, shotgun slung low, eyes scanning the woods like an animal cornered. "Put it down," Hale barked, rifle leveled. Evan froze, then smiled. "I was wondering when they'd send someone smarter than the sheriff." "I'm not here to talk," Hale said. "You're under arrest for the murder of Richard Mooney." "I didn't kill him," Evan replied, voice gravel deep. "He was already dead when I got there." "Then why run?" "Because I buried him." The air tightened. "He deserved worse," Evan hissed. "That bastard ruined my wife, turned her into someone I didn't recognize. He used her, like he used every woman who stepped into his cabin. That doesn't give you the right—" "I'm not looking for rights," Evan snapped. "I'm looking for justice." He lifted the shotgun, but Ranger lunged first. In a blur of motion, the dog hit Evan's arm, sending the gun clattering into the snow. Hale tackled him, pinning him down, cuffs biting into frostbitten wrists. "It's over," Hale said through clenched teeth. Evan stared up at him, wild-eyed. "No," he said, voice trembling. "It's not. You still don't get it." He turned to the trees, voice lowering to a whisper. He wasn't the only one. Back in town, Hale processed Evan's confession, but it raised more questions than it answered. If Mooney wasn't the first, who else was hiding secrets in Coldridge? And was the ice just beginning to crack? Night fell over Coldridge like a shroud. Hale stood outside the sheriff's station, eyes fixed on the still, frozen surface of Frost Lake. Evan Tucker was in custody. The case on paper looked ready to close, but something gnawed at him. Evan's words replayed in his mind. He wasn't the only one. Hale returned to the scene, the place where Mooney's body had been found. The ice had grown thicker since the first thaw, but the memory of that purple hand reaching through it hadn't faded. Ranger led him to the far edge of the lake, where no one had searched before. Suddenly, the dog stopped, barked once, then again. Hale knelt and swept away snow from a sunken spot near the shore. He used his shovel to break through the ice. Inches below the surface, caught in the frozen silt, was a second piece of fabric, this one blue and floral. A woman's scarf, bagged, tagged, hauled back to the lab. Results came quickly. Blood, human. Not Marilyn's, not Mooney's, not in any database. Later that night, Hale reviewed old missing persons files from the Tri-County area. A name leapt out. Ellie Dane, 24, last seen 2 winters ago. Had attended one of Mooney's cleansing retreats. Never came home. Case was marked presumed runaway. No body ever found. Until now. Hale stared at the map on his wall. He plotted the location of the scarf, then the fabric scrap, then the blood patch from 2 days before. 3 points. They formed a triangle. At its center, the old abandoned trail leading into Iron Hollow, a part of the forest sealed after a landslide 5 years ago. Locals avoided it, said it was cursed. Hale didn't believe in curses, but he believed in patterns. By dawn, Hale stood at the trailhead, Ranger by his side. "Whatever's out there," he said quietly, "we're not done." Ranger's tail rose, his breath puffed in the air like smoke from a gun barrel, and they stepped into the woods. Iron Hollow was a place the forest forgot. The trees grew thicker here, bent and crooked, as if warped by something deeper than time. The wind didn't whistle. It moaned, weaving between the branches like a voice that had lost its throat. Hale moved quietly, step by step, Ranger padding ahead. No tracks, no sound but crunching frost, until the dog stopped. Ranger barked once, then began to dig, madly. Hale dropped to one knee and helped. The soil beneath was soft, unnatural. Someone had disturbed it. 6 inches down, their fingers hit something hard. A bone, then another, then fabric, old, weather-stained, entangled in hair. Hale radioed for the forensic team. 3 hours later, the pit revealed 2 full skeletons, both female. One had a broken wrist. The other still wore a bracelet etched with the name Ellie. They weren't accidents, and they weren't buried with care. "They were dumped," said the pathologist grimly. Hale stared at the remains, then turned to Ranger, who sat silently, tail low, ears flattened. He looked mournful. "There's more," Hale said. Back at the station, Hale laid out every thread. Richard Mooney. ritualist, manipulator, connected to multiple missing women. Evan Tucker, vigilante, confessed to moving Mooney's body, claimed to protect his wife. Doc Sawyer, supplier of rope, lies, fear. Marilyn Tucker, pawn in a game she didn't see until it was too late. But none of them explained the second burial, the pattern, the triangle of victims. Then came the break, a phone call from a retired deputy in the next county. "I saw that name in your bulletin. Mooney," the man said. "He wasn't alone. Used to run retreats with another guy. Quiet, smart, kept the books." Hale's pen paused. "Name? Carver Langley. Used to be a therapist. Lost his license after some boundary issues with patients. Disappeared a few years back." Hale typed fast. Langley's name popped up, once, on a guest list for a retreat hosted at Mooney's cabin. 3 years ago, he'd signed in as guest counselor, then vanished. That night, Hale stood again at the lake's edge. Ranger sniffed the air. Hale didn't say a word. He stared into the frozen dark and whispered, "There's one more out there, and he's still breathing." Hale didn't sleep that night. The name Carver Langley haunted every file, every photograph, every cold case detail he'd pored over for weeks. A man smart enough to hide, careful enough to never leave fingerprints, because he knew how investigations worked. He used others, Mooney to lure, Sawyer to supply, Evan to distract. And now, Langley was a ghost, but ghosts leave traces. Ranger caught a scent by accident, on a discarded matchbox found near Iron Hollow. Hale had almost ignored it, but Ranger barked once, twice, and pawed the air like he'd found a whisper. The matchbox bore the faded logo of an old inn 10 miles west, the Hollow Lantern. A call confirmed it. "Yes, we have a long-term guest. Arrived last month. Pays cash. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Registered under the name Carl Van." Hale's blood went cold. Langley liked aliases, always with the same initials. CV. That evening, Hale and Ranger approached room 6 of the Hollow Lantern. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Inside, movement. A lamp flicked off. "Police!" Hale shouted. "Open up!" No time. Hale kicked the door in. Langley stood at the desk, mid-pack, a duffel bag half-zipped, something glinting inside. Knife? Rope? Keys? He didn't reach, just stared at Hale. "You figured it out," Langley said, voice calm, almost impressed. "I figured out what you made others do," Hale replied. "What you taught them, what you buried." Langley sighed. "They were already broken. I just showed them how to act." Ranger growled deep. His body bristled. "You're done, Carver," Hale said. Langley smiled faintly. "You're just in time then." He lunged, not for the bag, but for the window. Glass shattered, but Ranger was faster. The dog launched across the room, sank his teeth into Langley's arm, dragging him down hard. Hale pinned him, cuffed him. The bag tumbled open, spilling passports, burner phones, and a pendant identical to the one found on Ellie Dane's body. 3 months later, Coldridge thawed. Frost Lake shimmered in the spring sun. The last of the victims were named, their families notified. Langley was indicted on 4 counts of murder, 6 of conspiracy, and 1 of operating a psychological cult. Marilyn Tucker was relocated with her daughter. Evan took a plea deal and would spend the next 15 years in prison, but away from the shadows that devoured him. As for Ranger, he was awarded a medal for distinguished service. On Hale's porch that summer, Ranger lay sprawled in the sun, eyes half closed. "You did it," Hale said softly, patting his head. "No more lies, no more silence." The lake no longer whispered, but it would always remember. Core values learned from the story. Truth always finds a way to emerge. Even if it's buried under ice or hidden behind layers of lies, truth will surface. Bit by bit, through scraps of cloth, traces of blood, and scratches in the snow, the real story comes to light. Justice doesn't only come from courtrooms, it comes from perseverance. Characters like Jackson Hale and his dog Ranger represent those who don't give up. They aren't fooled by appearances, and their persistence brings justice to the forgotten and the voiceless. Silence can be an accomplice to evil, Many characters sensed wrongdoing, but chose silence out of fear, shame, or manipulation. That silence allowed abuse and violence to continue unchecked. Evil often wears the mask of goodness. Carver Langley was intelligent, articulate, and educated, a manipulative figure who used trust and psychology to control others. The story reminds us that not everyone who appears wise or kind is trustworthy. Lessons we can take away. Be mindful of where you place your trust. Misplaced trust can destroy lives or make you a tool for others' evil. Small details matter. In both investigations and life, the smallest things, a thread, a scent, can reveal the greatest truths. Someone must be willing to act. Truth doesn't surface on its own. It needs someone brave enough, like Hale or Ranger, to dig through discomfort and danger. Justice needs both human courage and animal instinct. Ranger, the police dog, wasn't just a helper. He symbolized pure instinct that sees beyond lies, reacting only to the undeniable scent of guilt and violence.